So we walk into this small, dark room. And as we step through the door, we see about 25 young men patiently sitting on a few beds cramped together against the wall.
There's a heavy silence despite the number of people in the room, but the excitement is palpable. We can tell that they've been waiting for this moment, and so had we.
Truth be told, not many outsiders wander there, so it was quite an event for us and for them. Our friend who brought us here opens the conversation. She introduces us and asks them to introduce themselves. And at this moment, out of nowhere, a deep roar breaks the silence and shakes everything in the room.
They had started to sing without any instruments. Their voices were so powerful that you could feel the vibrations in the air all around you. They were singing music called Iskitamiya, and chances are you already listened to it. In fact, the whole world listened to it. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, well, this here should sound familiar.
In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight. In the jungle, the quiet jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
Can't hear you, buddy. Back me up.
The Lion Sleeps Tonight was hugely popular all over the world and for several generations. A few years ago, the song became a hot topic again after Netflix released a documentary called The Lion's Share.
Disney against the poor African family.
Still, most people don't know where the genre comes from.
We didn't, at least, but we thought, you know what, that seems like an interesting story. So off we went to South Africa. And what we discovered there was not just an interesting story, but a full chapter of human history.
The story of Iskitamiya is that of people who were dispossessed of everything, down to their families and future. But it is also a story of grit and unity. The story of people who refused to give up their dignity, even when everything else had been taken away.
It is a story that began in the mines of South Africa during one of the most tragic times of the country's history.
Miners have to dig it out a mile below the earth.
It's about 8 a.m. Our main contact, Nolukazi, just picked us up and we're driving towards downtown Johannesburg to an iconic place in the recent history of Iskitamiya. And this place is, well, a taxi rank.
We're here to pick up a very popular singer known as Mkhehle. He just returned to Johannesburg after visiting his family in the village, and the taxi will drop him at this station.
So this is Sihle Mkhehle. He's very popular, hey? You'll see when you get there.
This is basically where all the people from the different provinces come to Johannesburg to find work in the mines.
Mkhehle is the archetype of the Iskitamiya singer. He grew up in a rural town near Durban called Umzimkhulu. When he was old enough, he left his home and family to find work and got a job at a gold mine on the outskirts of Johannesburg. He then joined a choir in Soweto with other men who came from the same region. For all of them, this taxi rank is a gate between their home and their life in the city.
Siyalayisha la umphakathi yaKwaZulu Natal eNatal. Sisuka from Joburg siya eMzimkhulu. Ana sinomzimkhulu, sinenkandla, Great Town, Mpumalanga.
There's that community feel to it because these are people that you already know from back home that are helping you to access better opportunities by actually bringing you here. Maybe you came here looking for better opportunities, but then you had like a misfortune, you were put into prison, or maybe things did not work out for you. These people, because they know you from home, they're able to take you back home. Even if you don't have money, and then maybe at home they will sell like a sheep or a goat to then finance your trip, but you're already home.
Taxi ranks like this one developed in the later stages of the migratory system timeline, but workers have been on the move for many generations before that. The entire system was shaped by a complex history of colonial exploitation and apartheid segregation, and it played a key role in the development of Isicathamiya. So let's have a look at how it all started.
The Cape Colony had relied on slaves since the beginning to build infrastructures and work on farms. At different points in time, it was importing people from Madagascar, South and Southeast Asia, Eastern Africa, China, and also enslaving local San and Khoikhoi people. During the 19th century, several events shaped the South African economic landscape and drove the demand for cheap labor up for generations to come. Ironically, the first event was the abolishment of slavery by the British Empire in 1833, which led to chronic labor shortages. Second, the shortage of labor was further aggravated in the late 1800s when the industrial sector started to grow rapidly, in big part driven by the mining sector.
It takes several minutes for the loaded dump cars to reach the main shaft.
To answer that, political and economic powers slowly introduced a migratory work system that would have devastating consequences for millions of people. Under this system, black men were recruited from rural areas to work in mines and other labor-intensive industries. They left their homes and families for months or years on end and traveled sometimes as far as 2,000 miles. Slavery was abolished, only to leave room for another system that perpetuated the same injustices. Different means of pressure were used to push people into these jobs, such as ethnicity-specific taxes, restrictions on land use, and other political and economic levers.
Life was, yet again, hard. All sense of personal identity or belonging was erased. With time, men lost touch with their families and communities. Working and living conditions were horrendous, and for those who survived the hunger, the diseases, and the mines, there was no way out of the rat race.
In this chaos, some workers started to find refuge and purpose in singing. Music offered a break from the exhausting working conditions in the mines, and it was a form of resistance. It gave workers an outlet to express their feelings and opinions in ways that was culturally significant, but also non-threatening to the authorities. Groups of men, often coming from the same region, started to form groups and perform weekly. They drew on their culture and got inspired by what they saw around them.
A combination of Zulu traditional wedding songs and international music started to emerge. It was also influenced by Christian hymns that were brought along by missionaries, as well as American musical shows that were big in South African cities in the 1860s. Many groups from New York and elsewhere were touring extensively, and ragtime, minstrel shows, vaudeville were mesmerizing South African audiences.
After a lot of refining, groups of migrant workers started to sing in complex, interweaving harmonies that follow the classic 4-parts arrangements that we know in Western music: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. They also added a very specific type of choreography that they called the I-step, and the lyrics were typically centered around human conditions, hardships, and often around the home. These men sang about the homes that they have left behind and that they missed so badly.
While the workers were singing about their homes, Isicathamiya was finding its own. And here we're talking about migrant hostels. The migrant hostels, or compounds, are a signature element of the migratory work system in South Africa. And the concept was first introduced by a group of mining companies. It was then popularized by a diamond mining giant, still active today, called De Beers. You know, a diamond is forever.
The diamond engagement ring. How else else could 2 months' salary last forever? A diamond is forever. De Beers.
Miners have to dig it out a mile below the Earth's surface.
The goal of the compounds was to reduce the costs of housing and to better control the workers. And they were designed just for that. In fact, the architecture of many compounds was similar to that of the Panopticon, a jail model that was proposed in 1785 by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Panoptical layouts feature a central tower for the guards, while the inmates, or anarchist workers, live in a circular building all around it. This enables the guards to see the workers at all times, while the workers cannot see the guards. Because they can't see anything, the workers alter their behavior due to the constant fear of being watched.
Later, with the onset of the apartheid, hostels also became a convenient way to bring blacks closer to work sites, while preventing them from fully integrating the cities that were reserved for whites. Since they couldn't bring their families with them, the workers could never really settle.
After the apartheid was abolished, hostels slowly started to fall out of favor. Today, many have been demolished or deserted, but some still exist. And that's precisely where we headed next. We picked up in Kechle, and at the same moment, somewhere in Soweto, there was a group of about 25 men who still dance, sing, and live the way their ancestors did a century ago, that were waiting for us at a gated migrant hostel.
When we arrived at the gate, Nolukazi had to negotiate our entry. It is a strictly men's hostel and women are usually not allowed inside, but the guard made an exception for us. So we got in and finally met the Inkululeko Corps. Mkekhle is their lead singer. That week, they were rehearsing for an upcoming competition, and we were lucky to get a taste of what that looks like. One song, 2 songs, 3 songs. These men have dozens of songs in their repertoires, and we didn't even see a single music sheet.
In Isicathamiya, nothing is written. The choirs compose everything without a trace and learn it all by heart. It's even more impressive knowing that the singers sing different parts.
Scholars don't know for sure what the timeline was, but at some point during the grim period between 1890 and 1920, Isicathamiya started to reach its final shape. That's really when workers from hostels around Johannesburg and Durban started to form corps. They called themselves Kutotsa Mfana, which means the tiptoe guys, because they were taking great care not to wake up the security guards.
Being part of a choir meant a lot more than having a hobby. It meant becoming part of a community again. It meant joining a network of men who had your back and who would show up for you when even harder times hit.
Ngabona impatho nentokozo yokuba ngaphakathi kwabo. Ngazibona nami ngiwumuntu phakathi kwabo, bangithatha bangifaka phakathi kwabo. Ngithe mangifika la ngathanda indlela abacula ngakhona. Ngafunda, ngangena kuma competition, kwanzima, ngibheda. Kodwa bakwazanga ukungilahla abafowethu, then banginikeza bangisupporta, then ngaze ngagena more ngaba right.
As the movement grew bigger, groups started to organize competitions. Competition is highly valued in the Zulu culture, and Isicathamiya offered a constructive outlet for any feelings of rivalry and a way to strengthen bonds among group members. Saturday nights became a ritual for performers and audiences who would gather in the hostels until the early hours the following day. A jury was also carefully chosen, and the choirs were judged based on 3 aspects of their performance: the music, the dance, and the presentation.
Isicathamiya is a gentleman's music, and singers carefully curate every aspect of their appearance. Their clothes are impeccably clean, they do ritual face steaming the days before the competition, and they drink a lot of water to have a clear and smooth skin. Is that competition stakes are high. Performers get praise and recognition from their fans, and they compete for money or other prizes that are made of the participation fees each group has to pay. Back in the day, the winning choir would receive a goat or some other goods, and they would get small gifts from their fans as well.
That's how migrant workers recreated an entire culture in the place of the one that had been erased. Now, here's an interesting fact. For most of this time, nobody knew or talked about Isiketamia. It just wasn't called that way. And actually, the story of how it became known as Isiketamia is quite interesting. So, the history of names for the genre is a blurry topic. The first name that we know of appeared in 1939, and it is Mbube. Mbube means lion in isiZulu. And it also happens to be the real title of the song that the world knows as The Lion Sleeps Tonight, or Wimowe, which is just a mishearing of Mbube.
Mbube was a hit when it came out, and it went viral in South African communities. So much so that it lent its name to the genre and influenced the style. The group that recorded Mbube at the time was called the Evening Birds, and it influenced Isiketamia in many other ways. They were credited for popularizing the Western suit as the main competition apparel, among other things. As the movement kept on growing, singers became more bold in their singing, and Mbube was loud and powerful. But in the late 60s, the apartheid regime, which was already oppressive to say the least, blew up to different dimensions, and the singers had to hide again.
The loud stomps and claps left the stage, and finer, more detail-oriented performances became the new ideal.
Apparently it's a very famous place here in Soweto, and we are just about to come and eat. Hey, what's up? You okay?
And obviously, the art forms like the dance, the music is very loud in the villages because they are free. But then in the cities, they found that there was curfew, for instance, because they were just laborers, they were just resources. So because of that, the white masters felt that they needed rest. They had to impose a curfew so that they would be well rested in order for them to be at their best productivity the following day in order to push the heavy work. But now this singing would always alert the gods that actually these people are not asleep. These people are actually chanting, dancing, and doing everything that they wanted to do. So that's how Isiketamia now developed, because the distinguishing factor for Isiketamia from the other kinds of musics that we grew up listening to was that it was almost soundless. It was a very beautiful a cappella. The voices were well blended, not loud. Even when they made their movements, they wouldn't stamp their feet because the stamping would obviously alarm the gods that, these people are not sleeping.
That's when the name Mbube was replaced with Isiketamia, which in isiZulu evokes the idea of walking softly in a cat-like manner.
At its core, Isiketamia is an art that never stopped evolving. It was born to reunite a community that had been dispatched, to remember the home that was left behind, and to provide an anchor to people who were denied any stability. The genre never stopped adjusting to the conditions of the community, and it evolved according to people's needs and the space that it was given.
As years went by, Isiketamia became popular in the villages the men came from. And when the apartheid was abolished and the migratory work system lost its velocity, the genre followed the men back home. In fact, Mkekhle was first discovered when he joined the boys' corps in Umzimkhulu, for which he's a mentor today.
Mkekhle, le talente lakho aliqale emncane. eselusa izikomo ngithi ngiyezwa lo mfana lona endlini yakhe uyacula ayi ngithi ngikahle umsindayo ngofoni le yini kanti yini lethu yakho wasucula hayi hamba umkhahla ezikomeni bebuye ezikomeni umkhahla ayeki lento yakhe hayi umkhahla phambili ngathi bahambe bocula eThekwini ePay House eThekwini bawini hayi ngabona ukuthi-ke lapho angingamphazamisa umkhehla angehlele ngezasi ngiphole hayi seladaba nasikhomo ayiphole kuba-ke umuntu ithalente lakhe angeke uze uthini ngithi-ke ngane yami kulungile isipho sakho noma wakho engasekho nje abheke mfana.
The genre had a big influence on the musical landscape of South Africa, and many artists have appropriated the genre and mixed it with other kinds of musics to come up with their own unique style. At Universal Studio in Johannesburg, we got to meet the members of Beyond Vocal.
They do Afropop and they mostly sing a cappella, which strongly reminds of Isicathamiya. And we're very much looking forward to hear what they have to say about their career.
And if you haven't heard about them yet, well, brace yourself. This is Beyond Vocal.
Oh yes, it goes something like da 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 da. One, two, three. Superman. Superman. A hero. A hero. A hero. A Superman. Oh, 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 oh. Ooh. Superman. Superman, a hero, a hero, a hero, a Superman.
The members of the band grew up listening to Isicathamiya at home, and while their style is a fusion of influences from all over the world, Isicathamiya definitely left its mark in their DNA.
As an a cappella group, you're competing with hip-hop. That's exciting music, that's dance music. So when you come with a cappella, it's almost as if after listening to like a heartbeat of hip-hop, and then you have to tone it down to understand what these guys that are doing a cappella. So the sound changes a little bit. So you always have to adapt your mind to say, okay, now I'm listening to something different, and I should still enjoy it and love it.
The music scene in South Africa is a very tough ground to play in.
So that is a challenge because there's plenty of us, and sometimes I feel like the platforms are not enough. We're all going for the same radio station because it's the only biggest one, or there are only 5 of them, so we're all rushing to those stations to be played.
And while Isicathamiya was spread far and wide, very few choirs and artists took off for good and made a name for themselves outside of their communities.
At the height of apartheid is more or less when the genre was the most popular, at least on the international scale. Ladysmith Black Mambazo is the most prominent example. They became international through their collaboration with Paul Simon and went on to have a stellar career.
In the last years, Isicathamiya has been declining in popularity, and some are worried about its preservation. Unfortunately for the singers, it's quite hard to keep up. Mkele spends 8 hours a day, 1 kilometer underground, which makes it hard to find time and energy for his art, and he's not an exception. It also costs money to buy the suits, take part in competitions, and sponsors are hard to find.
Ingqinamba ehlangabezana nazo ngizoqala la emlandweni wasemakhaya. Siyesibhekane nokuthi imali asinayo. Leyo mali leyo suke iculelwa ayihlanganisi nale mali esuke siyibhadale kwi-transport.
Isicathamiya is an entire culture that is articulated around an art. It is a lifestyle, it's a social dynamic, it's a set of values, and the glue to all this is the singing, the dancing, which were the only things that those men still had. Their voices, and their bodies and the freedom to create and imagine.
There are entire communities in South Africa that still live with the heavy consequences of the migratory work system that took place in the past century. Family disintegration, men struggling to find their place again in a society that adjusted to their absence, economic challenges, educational disadvantages, all this continues to impact many lives, and it will for generations.
Where we come from, women are naturally leaders. They are forced into leadership because there's nothing else. And so what we have to do, I think, and this is opposite to maybe like the European experience, is that we have to learn sort of like at a later stage to actually factor in the leadership of men.
There aren't many testimonies of what those people have been through. Isicathamiya is just that. It is a reminder, a witness, a non-written account of what happened. It is crucial to remember this art and to keep it alive for the sake of the generations that will come and grow from this soil. Healing is remembering who you are, and Isicathamiya is the memory of a people.
From to show you guys what he means by that. So from Isicathamiya to Michael Jackson, if we can just do that. 1, 2, 3. There's a place in your heart, and I know that it is love, and the place could be much brighter than tomorrow. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a little space to make a better place. Heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and make a better place. You and for a better place. You and for you and for save it for the children and for heal the world we're living. Save it for you and for me. Hallelujah.